There is a quiet frustration many people carry, a question that returns in moments of silence and grows louder with time. Why is my life moving slower than I expected? Why do things I prayed for, worked for, and believed in seem delayed? It can feel like you are watching others move ahead while you remain in the same place, waiting for something that refuses to arrive. But what if delays are not empty spaces? What if they are not signs of rejection, but seasons of preparation? The Bible is filled with people who experience delays, not as punishment, but as part of a deeper process. And when you look closely, you begin to see a pattern. God often works in ways that feel slow on the surface but are intentional underneath. Let us begin with the story of Joseph. Joseph received a dream at a young age, a vision that one day he would rise to a position of authority. It was clear, powerful, and full of promise. But almost immediately, his life took a different turn. He was betrayed by his own brothers, thrown into a pit, and sold into slavery. Instead of rising, he descended into hardship. In Egypt, he served faithfully in Potiphar's house, only to be falsely accused and thrown into prison. Years passed in confinement, with no visible progress toward the dream he once had. Genesis 40:23 captures the weight of that delay when it says, "The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him." Imagine that. Not only was Joseph suffering, but even the small hope of being remembered disappeared. Yet, what looked like abandonment was actually alignment. When the right moment came, Joseph was called out of prison to interpret Pharaoh's dream. In a single day, his position changed from prisoner to prime minister. Genesis 41:41 records Pharaoh saying, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." The delay was not denial, it was preparation. Joseph needed time to develop the character, wisdom, and resilience required for the role he would step into. The lesson here is clear. Sometimes, the reason things are not happening yet is because you are still becoming the person who can sustain what you are asking for. Now consider this in your own life. If everything you desire came instantly, would you be ready to handle it? Would your mindset, discipline, and character support it long term? This is a good moment to pause and reflect, and if this resonates, you can share your thoughts. Many people realize that what felt like delay was actually protection. Another powerful example is Abraham. God gave Abraham a promise that he would become the father of many nations. It was a promise that carried generational significance, yet years passed without any sign of fulfillment. Abraham and Sarah grew older, and the possibility of having a child seemed to fade. In Genesis 15:5, God tells Abraham, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be." It was a vision that required faith beyond what was visible, but the delay tested that faith. At one point, Abraham and Sarah tried to force the promise through their own plan, leading to complications that had long-term consequences. This shows something important. Delays often tempt us to take control prematurely. Eventually, in Genesis 21:2, the promise was fulfilled. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Notice that phrase, "at the very time." Not earlier, not later. There was a precise timing attached to the promise. The lesson here is about trust. Delays teach you to rely not on your timeline, but on God's timing. They stretch your patience, refine your faith, and expose areas where you might be trying to control what was never meant to be rushed. Now think about this honestly. Are there areas in your life where impatience is pushing you to force outcomes? Are you trying to accelerate something that requires time to mature? Let us move to another story, one that reveals a different dimension of delay. The story of David. David was anointed king while he was still a young shepherd. In 1 Samuel 16:13, the prophet Samuel anoints him, and from that moment the calling was clear. But David did not become king immediately. Instead, he returned to the fields, tending sheep as if nothing had changed. Years later, he would face Goliath, serve in Saul's court, and eventually become a fugitive, running for his life from the very king he was meant to replace. The delay between anointing and appointment was filled with challenges, growth, and testing. During this period, David developed skills that would later define his leadership. He learned warfare, patience, humility, and dependence on God. In Psalm 27:14, he writes, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." This was not theoretical advice. It came from lived experience. The lesson here is that calling and manifestation are often separated by a season of preparation. Being chosen does not mean being ready. The delay bridges that gap. In modern life, this applies in many ways. You might know your potential. You might see glimpses of where your life is heading, but the journey in between can feel long and uncertain. That space is where growth happens. Now consider the story of Lazarus. In John 11, Jesus receives news that Lazarus is sick. Those around him expect immediate action, but instead of rushing, Jesus delays. John 11:6 says, "So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days." This decision seems confusing, even painful. By the time Jesus arrives, Lazarus has already died. To those watching, it appears too late. Martha expresses this in John 11:21, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." This is the voice of disappointment, the feeling that the delay cost too much. But the story does not end there. Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, performing a miracle that reveals a greater level of power and purpose. The delay allowed something deeper to happen, something that would not have been seen if things had moved according to human expectations. The lesson here is profound. Sometimes delays are not just about preparation. They are about positioning for a greater outcome than you originally imagined. This raises an important question. What if the delay you are experiencing is setting the stage for something bigger than what you initially asked for? At this point, it is important to understand that delays are not always comfortable. They can feel isolating, confusing, and even discouraging. But they are not empty. They are active seasons where unseen work is taking place. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." This includes delays. Even when you do not see progress, something is being formed beneath the surface. As you reflect on this, think about your current situation. Where do you feel stuck? Where do you feel like time is moving, but nothing is changing? Now consider a different perspective. What if this season is shaping something within you that will matter later? Growth often happens quietly. It is not always visible, but it is essential. As we come to the end, remember this. Delay is not a dead end. It is a process. It is where character is built, faith is strengthened, and purpose is clarified. The waiting season is not wasted if you are growing within it. Take a moment to reflect on your journey. What have you learned in your waiting? What has changed within you that you did not notice before? If this message spoke to you, share your thoughts. Someone else might be encouraged by your perspective. Stay patient, stay grounded, and most importantly, stay open to what this season is producing in you. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Drop a comment about what you are currently waiting on, and share this with someone who might need encouragement. And continue with the next video in this series, where we go deeper into how to recognize when your season is about to change. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. God bless you.